And swimming pool surfaces the best finish.
That smooth, fine finish, trust Italtex.
Italtex, no need to refix.
NTV, turning on your world.
Yes, a very good morning. We are coming to you live from the Kampala Serena Conference Center Hotel, where various stakeholders have converged to commemorate the International Day of Democracy, which is being observed under the theme COVID-19, a spotlight on democracy. Now get this, through the strengthening of electoral processes in Uganda project that is also known as the SEPU project, the Electoral Commission is partnering with the United Nations Development Programme to commemorate the International Day of Democracy in 12 regional workshops, just like this one that you're seeing at the Kampala Serena Conference Center Hotel. Now, the major aim of these activities will be to promote awareness on the standard operating procedures on the election activities this year, 2020, and the national election in 2021. You saw what we witnessed in the NRM primaries. Was there any social distancing whatsoever? You had voters who were not actually wearing any face masks. Yes, there wasn't social distancing. There wasn't any wearing of face masks in that regard. So all that would exacerbate the spread of COVID-19 in the wake of people trying to exercise their constitutional right. So one of the major aims of this activity today is to promote awareness on the standard operating procedures on COVID-19 and the election activities that will be taking center stage, especially after the campaigns. Now, that is only part of the issue. We shall also be ensuring informed enforcement of the standard operating procedures. You've also noticed the behavior of the security operatives during this COVID-19 pandemic, the way they've been handling the people they meet on the streets while trying to enforce the standard operating procedures. The heavy-handedness. Is there another option that these security apparatus can be using to ensure that there is a formidable way or a formidable measure through which the security apparatus can enforce the standard operating procedures while also respecting the citizenry, the citizens of this country, Uganda? So those are some of the two things: promotion of the awareness on standard operating procedures, ensuring informed enforcement of the standard operating procedures, and above all, here comes the big one, safe and enthusiastic participation in the electoral processes in Uganda, and hence promoting democracy in the country. It is one thing to participate in an election, yes, and it is another to enthusiastically participate in the same electoral process. We noticed during the NRM primaries, people were so scared to even show up at the polling stations. That is no way, it's not the way things are supposed to be running. You're supposed to be enthusiastic about the person you're going to be voting for in that election. So the purpose of this activity today is to promote a safe and enthusiastic participation of all Ugandan citizens in the electoral processes so that we can promote democracy. And as you can see, it's also coinciding with the International Day of Democracy under the theme COVID-19, a spotlight on democracy. We shall have a slew of panelists talking. I'll start with some of those that will be making center stage online. Dr. Jonas Tegeni Waldemariam, the World Health Organization representative to Uganda, shall be joining us online to give us an update on the coronavirus pandemic. We shall also hear it from Mrs. Helen Kezinwoha. She is the Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Dr. Monica Masonro, she's the Presidential Advisor on Epidemics and Pandemics. She will also give us an update on how far the National COVID-19 Task Force has gone in enforcing the COVID-19 standard operating procedures and stemming the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We shall also hear it from the Uganda Police Force. Someone will be representing the force, that is Mr. Moses Kafero. Yes, representing the Uganda Police Force. And we shall also have Mr. Zaidi Mukasa from the National Consultative Forum. And above all, we shall have the Electoral Commission Chairperson, Justice Simon Mujenyi Byabakama. He's already here and is going to be giving us his opening remarks and so forth. I shall also interrogate him on the standard operating procedures. Why is it that the people within the NRM yes, the loyalists were allowed to go ahead and participate and break the COVID-19 rules. But when we see the, opposition loyalists do the same, security apparatus is pouncing on them. So those double standards and so forth. So we shall be tasking the Electoral Commission Chairperson, Justice Simon Mujenyi Byabakama, for answers in that regard. Mr. Simon Byabakama, you can join us on the podium for your opening remarks. You're now watching NTV Uganda. We are live. Mr. Simon? The floor is yours. Thank you.
The UNDP resident representative, deputy chairperson of the Electoral Commission, members of the UNDP family, representatives of political parties present here, our health experts who are present with us, all of you distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this honor to congratulate the people of Uganda and the world at large on this auspicious occasion when we celebrate the International Day of Democracy. This special day brings together various stakeholders to reflect on democracy, elections, and governance. It gives us the opportunity to deliberate on the state of democracy in Uganda and other countries of the world, as brought together under the banner of the United Nations family, which is important indeed, given the central role of democracy in the governance of nations. The UN General Assembly has reaffirmed that democracy is a universal value based on the freely expressed will of people to determine their political, economic, social, and cultural systems and their full participation in all aspects of their lives. As a result, there is now broad consensus among UN member states that democratic elections are essential for establishing legitimate authority of governments. Hence, the number of elections that are held around the world has increased substantially over the past 3 decades. Uganda is proud to associate with this principle and practice. I wish to appreciate UNDP for the commitment towards supporting the democratization process in Uganda, which dates back to the constitution-making process. UNDP has been supporting several programs aimed at ensuring that a wide range of rights, democratic processes, and institutions as provided for under the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution, become a reality for the people of Uganda. Today's joint event is a further manifestation of the strong partnership that continues to grow between key institutions of the government of Uganda and UNDP. The Electoral Commission, as we all know, was established under Article 60 of the Constitution of Uganda and mandated under Article 61 to organize, conduct, and supervise regular and free and fair elections and referenda in Uganda. Since its establishment by the Constitution, the Commission has organized and conducted 4 general elections, 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, as well as 2 referenda on political systems, 2000 and 2005, and several parliamentary and local government councils elections and by-elections. These elections and by-elections continue to be a vital part of democratic governance in Uganda, where citizens regularly make choices on who and how they should be governed. This year's celebration comes at a time when the eyes of Ugandans, and indeed the whole world, are on the Commission as we implement various activities under the roadmap for the general elections 2020-2021. However, we are celebrating the place of democracy in our governance in the midst of a pandemic that has presented unique health and safety challenges to the manner in which usual election activities ought to be conducted. The Commission recognizes the constitutional right of citizens to vote and choose their leaders, as well as our duty to facilitate the exercise of those rights. We are also mindful of the need to ensure a healthy and safe environment for all stakeholders during the electoral process. This explains why we issued the Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs, to guide the conduct of election activities under the COVID-19 environment. The SOPs incorporated measures and guidelines put in place by Ministry of Health and the outcome of consultations made by the Commission with the various stakeholders in the electoral processes to prevent and combat person-to-person, person-to-object, and object-to-person spread of the COVID-19 during the conduct of elections. The SOPs reinforce other multi-sector approaches to combat COVID-19 and particularly are aimed at ensuring healthy and safe participation in the electoral processes, hence promoting democracy. Today's theme, COVID-19, a spotlight on democracy, is timely and reminds us of the reality of COVID-19 and the challenges it poses to the conduct of participatory democratic elections. It also emboldens us not to dismiss elections as impossible without critical analysis of the risks, implications, and considering reasonable and alternative measures that could be applied to protect both the health of the people, their democratic rights, and safeguard democracy. The Commission made these considerations and has since guided that the conduct of electoral activities will have to be as contactless as possible with substantially reduced physical human interactions. As you may have been briefed, the roadmap is now in its critical phase, with the nomination of candidates set for the following dates. For local government, nominations will start on 21st September and end on 1st October 2020. Nomination for candidates for parliamentary elections will take place on 12th to 13th October 2020. Nomination of candidates for presidential elections will take place on 2nd to 3rd November 2020. The nominations will be followed by a campaign period leading to the polling days for the various elective positions highlighted above during the period of 10th January to 8th February 2020. As the electoral process progresses, we will continue to engage with the stakeholders on COVID-19 related challenges during the electoral processes. These engagements have helped us to innovate and adapt while implementing election activities. We urge all stakeholders to explore the opportunities offered by the various non-contact methods, remote engagement approaches, and low human-to-human contact interactions so that we achieve safe participation in these elections. I look forward to today's presentations and discussions on the measures we have put in place to achieve healthy, safe, and high participation in the elections, hence promoting democratic processes in spite of COVID-19. I salute the resolve of Ugandans to combat COVID-19 and to make democracy work. For God and my country, I thank you for listening to me.
You're welcome. Maybe before you leave, I had a counter question for you.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that from 10th of January up to the 8th of February. That's the period of campaigns.
No. Polling.
That's the period of polling.
Yeah.
All right, but then I wanted to get you on the standard operating procedures so that you break them down for us.
Yes.
Yes. Can you do that?
Well, first of all, I think the standard operating procedures are well known to most of us by now. These were the procedures that were put in place by our health experts, Minister of Health. Wearing of masks. Though I don't see you putting on your mask, Mr. Moderator. Wearing of masks, social distancing, and washing of hands. And avoiding as much as possible physical contact with their fellow human being. Because although I'm not a medical expert, but this pandemic is almost, I don't know how to describe it, insidious, it's what? And you can't, at least when someone is suffering from flu, you can tell this person has flu. But it's something, they call it asymptomatic cases. You can have it and then you are not actually revealing the symptoms. So I think the important thing we have got to realize as Ugandans is that we can only fight this pandemic when all of us are cautious of our individual responsibilities. But if we are going to take it lightly, well, Dr. Masonro is here, she will tell us how we are doing, but I've been telling people that at the time we launched the revised roadmap, which was on the 16th of June this year, there was no single reported death as a result of COVID-19. But June, July, August, September, how many days have we recorded? It's very unfortunate that some of us have chosen to trade or to take this pandemic lightly. And I want to urge all leaders, particularly the political leaders, please urge your supporters, urge your people to observe the SOPs. Because this trend, from my own perspective, is rather worrying. The increase in infections, the levels of infections in one single day is something we do not have in the 4 months, I think, or when we had the lockdown, or the 3 months we had the lockdown. But now, the choice is entirely in our hands. Do we have what is required within us to ensure that this pandemic, this virus, does not have an exponential spread in the country? I think we have. And for that matter, I would like to urge each one of us who are in this room, and also who are on Zoom, who are participating in this engagement on Zoom, please let us remind ourselves, let us remind our people that COVID-19 is a serious pandemic. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Justice Simon Mujenyi Byabakama, for that update. It was really pertinent for the Justice Simon Byabakama to give us that update on the standard operating procedures because of what we witnessed in the NRM primaries. There was zero adherence to the standard operating procedures. There was zero wearing of face masks. Some of them had them face masks on the chin, and they were not covering their mouth and nose or whatsoever. So I wanted to ask Mr. Byabakama what the Electoral Commission intends to do moving forward. But as you can see, with such a workshop like we are having right now, we are here to promote awareness on the standard operating procedure. So this is one of the ways the Electoral Commission is trying to sensitize the people right there in Uganda, so that as we head into this election and as you exercise your constitutional mandate, you also you're also cognizant of the fact that you have to protect your health and your neighbor and your family. wearing a face mask, disinfecting all surfaces at all times. It's a must, and social distancing shouldn't be an option in that regard. My name is Romy Busiku, and you're watching NTV Uganda. We are here to commemorate the International Day of Democracy under the theme COVID-19, a spotlight on democracy. At this point, I'd like to invite the UNDP, that is the United Nations Development Programme resident representative to Uganda, that's none other than Ms. Elsie Atafua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I would read a two-part statement, one on behalf of the United Nations family and UNDP, and one on behalf of the Secretary General of the United Nations, as delegated by the United Nations Resident Coordinator. The Chairperson, the Electoral Commission, Honorable Simon Biabakama, Excellencies and members of the Diplomatic Corps, and I'd like to particularly recognize the ambassadors of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Austria, and Iceland, who are supporting the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project called SIPU, which is funding this initiative. Representatives of ministries, departments, and agencies of government. Again, I'd like to recognize the EC board and staff, the members of the Development Partners Community, colleagues from the United Nations family, and I'd like to recognize the Deputy Representative of UN Women and all the other colleagues who are connected online, including the representative of the World Health Organization. Colleagues from the private sector, academia, civil society, the media fraternity, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations family, I welcome you to this important occasion as we join the rest of the world to observe International Day of Democracy 2020. Globally, this day provides an opportunity to review the state of democracy, to celebrate the gains achieved, and to dialogue on how to safeguard these gains for future posterity. The United Nations family is proud to celebrate this day with all Ugandans and to reaffirm our commitment to support Uganda in its democratic journey as espoused in the country's constitution. As you know, this gathering is not only a celebration, it is a significant opportunity to support a strategic and ongoing dialogue, drawing on our collective strengths and complementarities to provide the people of Uganda free, fair, peaceful, and safe elections in 2020-2021. Let me from the onset thank the government of Uganda for its leadership and cooperation towards this effort. I'm encouraged by the strength and consistency in the working relations we have built and continue to cultivate through cooperation with the United Nations family in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the principle of leaving no one behind. We salute you. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, Uganda marks this day at a very momentous time for two important reasons. It is being celebrated as Uganda prepares for the next general elections in January-February 2021. These polls will be the fourth under a multi-party political dispensation. Second, the elections and all pre-election activities are taking place during this unprecedented time of the COVID pandemic that has adversely impacted the whole world. The United Nations Development Programme, together with the United Nations agencies, are honored to partner with the various state and non-state institutions, including the Electoral Commission, to dialogue and plan for the implementation of the country's electoral roadmap under this new normal context brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. I wish to highlight three messages on this International Day of Democracy. First, as the country implements the electoral roadmap, all the electoral stakeholders must reflect on how best they engage in the electoral process to enhance the democratic outcomes and also minimize the risk of spreading COVID-19. Here in Uganda, the Electoral Commission, a key partner of the United Nations, has undertaken extensive consultation with stakeholders, and as a result, the Electoral Commission has issued the standard operation procedures to guide the safe conduct of election activities amidst COVID-19. These are in alignment with the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health and the World Health Organization. Of concern, however, is a mixed level of adherence to the guidelines across board, including some open flouting of the standard operating procedures that we have witnessed in some of the initial electoral activities. The challenge is therefore in adherence and in enforcement, and this is not the responsibility of the Electoral Commission or the government alone. This is a whole of society responsibility if we are to meaningfully deal with COVID-19 pandemic. Adhering to these guidelines from the Electoral Commission and the Ministry of Health by all Ugandans is critical in ensuring a safe, inclusive, transparent, and peaceful election. The United Nations is committed to working with all stakeholders to support awareness raising on the standard operating procedures and to support stakeholders to abide and collectively enforce their adherence to the SOPs. Ladies and gentlemen, the second key message I will wish to convey is for all stakeholders to safeguard peace and social cohesion as the country moves towards the general elections. Regrettably, we have witnessed across the country instances of violence, tensions being fueled by provocative language, and also huge increase in reports of gender-based violence. Violence should not be tolerated, especially violence against women and children. Uganda has for long enjoyed peace and stability that has enabled the achievement of development gains. On this International Day of Democracy, I urge all the stakeholders to commit to jealously guard peace and stability as citizens exercise their democratic rights. As UNDP and indeed the United Nations family, we continue to support these efforts, particularly the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, specifically the Sustainable Development Goal 16 on developing effective, accountable, and transparent institutions, as well as Sustainable Development Goal 5 on ensuring women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making processes. This is really anchored in the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project, simply called SEPU. Through this SEPU project, UNDP in partnership with the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, UN Women, UN Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, are working with various stakeholders, both state and non-state, including the Electoral Commission, in contributing to the following. 1, strengthening transparency and inclusion in the electoral process. 2, enhancing institutional capacity for the Electoral Commission and other electoral stakeholders. And 3, improving peace-building mechanisms. The project is funded through a basket fund arrangement with generous contributions from the governments of Norway, Sweden, Austria, Denmark, Iceland, and UNDP headquarters, all of which have representatives joining us today, either physically or virtually. We sincerely thank you for this support. Ladies and gentlemen, the third and final message I wish to convey is for all stakeholders to collectively focus on post-COVID-19 recovery and resilience building. Uganda, like many countries, has been seriously impacted by COVID-19 and is seeking to recover from the pandemic. As we build forward better, our collective efforts must therefore seek to move the country forward through peaceful elections, as well as ensuring strong commitment to the adherence of the COVID-19 SOPs. This will call for us to build on and consolidate Uganda's development gains and not to erode it. This will call for us to focus on national interest and not individual or group interest. And this will call for us to truly actualize our country's motto, for God and for my country. In other words, we owe it to ourselves and generations to come that the foundations of peace and stability are guarded. In conclusion, I reiterate the United Nations Development Programme and the United Nations family continued commitment to working with all stakeholders to support Uganda's democratic processes for the benefit of the people of Uganda. It is my hope that the outcomes of this gathering will constructively influence and fortify Uganda's democratic process as we approach 2021 election. Please count on the full support of the United Nations family. As I conclude, I would like to extend my appreciation to the Electoral Commission for the long and trusted partnership. Now let me read the Secretary General's message, which I'm reading on behalf of the United Nations Resident Coordinator. And it reads, as the world confronts COVID-19, democracy is crucial in ensuring the free flow of information, participation in decision-making, and accountability for the response to the pandemic. Yet, since the beginning of the crisis, we have seen the emergency used in a range of countries to restrict democratic processes and civic space. This is essentially dangerous in places where democracy roots are shallow and institutional checks and balances are weak. The crisis is also highlighting and aggravating long-neglected injustices, from inadequate health system to social protection gaps, digital divides, and unequal access to education, from environmental degradation to racial discrimination and violence against women. Along with profound human toll, these inequalities are themselves threats to democracy. Well before the pandemic, frustration was rising and trust in public authorities was declining. A lack of opportunities was driving economic unease and social unrest. Today, it is clear that governments must do more to listen to people demanding change, open new channels for dialogue, and respect freedom of peaceful assembly. On this International Day of Democracy, let us seize this pivotal moment to build a more equal, inclusive, and sustainable world with full respect for human rights. I wish us all a peaceful and happy International Day of Democracy. Thank you very much.
Well, that is the United Nations Development Programme resident representative to Uganda, Elsie Atefua. She couldn't have sent that message home any better. Violence in an election is totally uncalled for. And as NMG, the Nation Media Group, we continue to reiterate the importance of a peaceful electoral process in this country. And as you exercise your electoral mandate or constitutional mandate, you also have to be cognizant of the fact that we are in a COVID-19 pandemic, which has wrought havoc on a global scale. Yes, all over the world, we are now grappling with 29 million plus positive cases of the coronavirus. And here in Uganda alone, that's 4,978 positive cases of the coronavirus, and we've lost 56 people. So as we proceed with this electoral process, it's important that the people in Uganda, the citizens, are cognizant of the fact that there is a pandemic that has wrought havoc on the global scale, and it has not spared Uganda at all. So we are going to be reiterating the standard operating procedures and guidelines for conducting elections in a COVID-19 environment. Let me use this opportunity to invite Paul Bukenya, the spokesperson of the Electoral Commission, to actually give us more updates on the SOPs. Bukenya.
Thank you, Romeo, and good morning once again, all protocol observed. I'm humbled to be the one to take you through this session. And I'll draw attention to the SOPs that were released, issued by the Electoral Commission on the 17th of August this year. The Commission, of course, recognizing the situation, the pandemic around, observed the unique health challenges that the COVID-19 situation has brought us into. So election activities cannot be conducted in the normal way we've been doing elections. Accordingly, we issued SOPs to guide various activities that will be conducted during the pre-nomination period, where we are right now. We've not nominated candidates as Electoral Commission, but there is a range of electoral activity taking place. Political parties, for example, are conducting their internal party processes. We call it pre-nomination. Then during the nomination exercise itself, which brings together many people, aspiring candidates, agents and supporters, and of course Electoral Commission staff. Then during the campaign period, which is the time when candidates go out to solicit for support from the voters. And then of course polling day. A detailed SOPs for polling days will be issued in due course. For purposes of today, our meeting, we will focus on the pre-nomination, nomination, and the campaign period. So how has the Commission guided stakeholders to conduct themselves in a safe manner during the pre-nomination, nomination, and the campaign period? Of course, all these activities are very interactive, and one of the things we looked at is the collection of nomination forms. As the chairperson outlined already, we are heading for nomination of candidates at local government level. These are the biggest, level that brings together many aspiring candidates. They're in thousands, hundreds of thousands, if we can say that. Aspiring candidates and their supporters, and this is how we've guided. In the issuance of nomination forms, there is contact, there is object-to-object risk, transmission of COVID, people coming together, and collection of supporter forms, supporter signatures. So we've guided that aspiring candidates will be able to access nomination forms via our website, so that there is they limit accessing physically the offices, but they can also collect nomination forms from our offices. And right now, as we speak, the nomination forms in hard copy were sent to the districts, and they are being collected. We know that some people have also collected the forms from the website. It has helped a lot. Just a phone call, can I download these forms? Are they genuine? Are they okay? We say, that's our website. No, this is not how we've been doing things. They said, but there's COVID. Just download that form. Everything you need is there. We even imposed a digital signature. That form is genuine. So we've had positive, higher traffic coming to our website as a result. And I think it has reduced on the number of people coming to the offices physically, and therefore reducing on the level of interaction, which exposes public to risk of COVID-19. So far, 76, and I don't know, maybe today there's someone else, 76 aspirants for presidential have collected nomination forms from our office, while others have picked forms from the website and guidelines from the website. The website has become a very good tool. We've guided that aspirants for general elections and parliamentary can also access forms physically, but where they are not able to, or where they are able, if they are able to access the internet, they should do that so that there is reduced traffic coming into the offices. In the process, when you approach our offices physically, definitely you cannot proceed to the offices without wearing a mask. And of course, washing hands, the facilities are there, and the social distancing. What about the process of collection of supporter signatures? Aspiring candidates are required under our respective laws to collect signatures to support their nominations. For example, an aspiring presidential candidate needs to raise support from at least, we have 146 districts in Uganda. You have to obtain support from at least 110 districts and 100 signatures from each district. So how do you do it safely? We've guided that in the process of doing the collection, you should wash your hands as you approach the homes. When you enter the compounds of people, wash your hands, put on your masks, wash your hands when you're approaching the home and when you are leaving, because you know in the process you may find that the person you visited is the one with COVID-19. So aspiring candidates and their agents are encouraged therefore to observe this when you're going to collect signatures. Make sure you observe the hygiene protocols that have been put in place by the Ministry of Health. It will save you, it will save the people who are going to collect the signatures from. So the voters signing, you know that some voters use their thumbprints. Who are using thumbprinting nomination forms are also supposed and encouraged to wear face masks and to wash their hands before thumbprinting and of course after thumbprinting, so that there is, enhanced protection. So both the voters and aspiring candidates have the obligation to ensure compliance in the wearing of masks, washing of hands, using sanitizers, and observing social distances. Now, given that this activity is taking place down in the local communities, a bar of soap, washing the hands with soap, is highly recommended, because at least this is something that the rural communities, our people are already familiar with, washing your hands with soap. What about conduct of nomination activities? We have guided that we will provide, and we have started on that. We did that during the nominations for special interest groups. The commission will have hand washing facilities, water, and a bar of soap, and sanitizers at all nomination centers. Nominations will be conducted at district headquarters and at county headquarters for certain categories of local governments. So the commission has planned and budgeted for that purpose. And we've made sure that we are limiting the number of people approaching our centers for purpose of nomination. So aspiring candidates who are here with us, who are watching, we want to emphasize that we'll only allow you, the candidate, the person proposing your name, and the seconder. So that means a group of 3 persons is easy to manage and to observe the SOPs for purposes of nominations. And we've guided that candidates can only use 2 vehicles, so no processions. That emphasizes the issue of processions. And processions, as we know, create a risk for contracting COVID-19. So returning officers who are conducting this exercise, of course, have also our staff. We are briefing them, we have briefed them, and this week we are also continuing with engagement with them Thursday and Friday to strengthen these protocols further and the procedures so that they are enforced during the nominations. As you're aware, the first level of nomination starts on Monday, 21st September. So we shall not allow other persons to come to the nomination centers except for purposes of nomination. And that means the candidate, the supporter, and the second, and possibly your driver. So all facilities at the nomination centers, venues, tables, chairs, door handles shall be sanitized. They will be sanitized and disinfected regularly to reduce and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. That's a measure that we put in place. What about conduct of campaigns? So Ministry of Health measures which are in force are up to this point, control public gatherings. And therefore, public rallies, mass public rallies remain banned. We have guided, though, that candidates may organize and hold regulated campaign meetings. And we've emphasized that conveners of such meetings must ensure that the measures and guidelines are put in place to prevent and combat the spread of COVID-19. We will work at ensuring that they are strictly observed. For example, social distancing, wearing of masks, and washing of hands. This is how we have recommended. We've recommended that persons preparing to conduct meetings must work with us as Electoral Commission, our returning officer, and the police in the electoral district to inspect the venue and see that it is suitable. When we are coming here, there was inspection of this venue to ensure that it can accommodate about 70 persons and who are seated and socially distanced. This is what we mean. So we've not put a specific number in our guidelines because we know that some political parties, some aspiring candidates want to use the Boma grounds, which is a big place that can take up to possibly 50,000 people. And they want to have a meeting in a tent for about 500 people. Now that is very reasonable and very, very, responsible of a candidate to say we are going to use the Boma grounds, the district ground, the school ground, and we can inspect it together and ensure that the tent that is put there can actually have this number of people. Distance, you're observing the 2-meter distance, the spacing that is recommended. So the role of police then comes in here. It is very key. We say that the role of police is very key. Working together and consulting the district task force is very, very important on the part of an aspiring candidate or on the part of a candidate. These should be very close partners as we prepare public meetings. What the Electoral Commission has emphasized for purposes of candidates' meetings, and which we want to also reiterate, is that the health and safety of citizens, voters, candidates, election staff, and other stakeholders, including non-voters, our children, the communities, should be the most important consideration during the electoral process. So if you are an aspiring candidate, if you're a candidate, you should put the health of these people as the most important above anything else. Because the commission, of course, like we said in our message, we want you alive on polling day. First of all, alive and then healthy, because you may be alive, but you're not able to come to the polling station to vote for yourself. But also the voters, the supporters, should be alive and healthy, that they can come and vote, because that's why we are going out there to campaign. Of course, you want people, ultimately, the end is the polling day. You want someone to come and vote for you. So we are sending a message that let's keep the candidates alive and healthy, and also let's keep the voters and the supporters alive and healthy before, during, and after elections. There is guidance that the Commission has provided for providing for use of media, and I hope I still have a minute or two. You do? Yes. To achieve non-contact engagement, to achieve remote engagement, to achieve low human-to-human interactions, the Electoral Commission has guided on the use of non-contact means to engage with audiences. These are means that candidates have always used, but we are advising that they should be taken to another level given the circumstances that are unique, that are not ordinary. So we are advising the use of things that we've used before, but now, of course, at another scale. Like posters have been used. They create visibility for the candidate. The banners create visibility. Your photograph is there. Your name is there, the political party name. Even the colors, they're there. The symbol that you've been given, all of those things that promote you as a candidate are there. And they can help to keep you visible in the electorate, or rather in the constituency, without bringing people together and exposing them to COVID-19. We've talked about, flyers that can be issued responsibly, of course, carefully. We've talked about radio announcements. These ones have been done before. Please vote for me, I'm your candidate. Where a candidate is able, television announcement. We've talked about an announcement in the paper or an advert, like we've done before. SMS. SMS has been used in elections before. If a candidate can afford that, that is better. The Commission has also urged the use of other non-contact means like new digital media. This includes media platforms like social media. Some people are already using that. We have seen it, and I think it is working. It's going all over the place. Then, of course, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and websites, those who can do that. But we've also advised that use of one-on-one, kakuyege, walking through the village, the parish, and responsibly, like we do every other day, because some levels of candidates don't do mass rallies by nature of their candidature. They don't do that. And I think it's also important not to alarm them that, you are going to suffer because there is no mass rallies, because they've not been doing that. The councillor has possibly 2 parishes or 3 parishes with 3 months to campaign, and during the 3 months, they can reach almost every home. They can talk to people in the gardens. Even as they're at a distance, I salute you, I am the candidate. That kind of engagement that we know that is very typical down there in the rural areas. So not all candidates actually do mass rallies. So let us encourage them to use the traditional means they've been using to limit the interaction, including one-on-one, or commonly known as kakuyege. Because I can talk to you without coming close to you, I can talk to you with my mask on, and then I tell you that I'm the candidate. And you have, a candidate has 3 months, and 2 parishes or 3 parishes to do that. I think you can achieve that. We've also encouraged the use of broadcasts like Chizindaro, because with permission from UCC, there is a consideration for use of Chizindaro. Chizindaro is when you can use a community radio in the marketplace. Where I come from, my village across there, there's an announcement in the morning. They greet us, they lead us in a prayer in the morning, they tell us things that happen. And in the afternoon, they announce a few things. In the evenings, they announce a kid who is lost, things like that. That announcement can also help to go a long way. But also the Commission has made provisions where people are to use media. They will not be subjected to higher prices or, prices going up, because engagement has been made with regulators to ensure that they do not hike prices because candidates are going to use radio stations for purposes of this broadcast. So these are all part of the measures to reinforce our SOPs, including the use of media, both private and government. And I would like to stop at that moment and engage Romeo if you have something else to say. Thank you very much for listening.
But don't move away. Don't move away. You just stand there. I have a quick interrogation for you. Now, during the primaries, there were some concerns that were reaching our desks at NTV Uganda. Many of the voters were saying, especially persons with disabilities, accessibility to polling stations. It was very hard for some persons with disabilities. Accessibility to polling stations, number one. Even the hand-washing points at the polling stations, for those who had made it to the polling area, they couldn't actually access the hand-washing points. Persons with disabilities suffering from dwarfism. You're too short, you can't reach the hand-washing point. So what are you going to be doing to ensure that this is not replicated on the national stage? And you also said that we are going to be using media, but then we saw the example of Bobby Wine, Robert Chagulanyi, who was being frustrated in Mbale when he was at a radio station, and Baba FM. Where's the assurance that on the national stage, this won't be replicated again? Such issues and instances, if you can help us shed more light on that.
Oh, wow, thank you, Romeo. Yes, there are lessons, of course, we've learned from the special interest groups about implementing and putting into effect the SOPs. For example, even the hygiene of the places, we don't have polling stations. They are not our places that we rent, or we use public spaces. So we have learned some lessons in the issues that come up, including access to those facilities. I think that is something that will be looked at as we do our final preparations for polling in the national elections, as we do the training of election officials, because every lesson we learned at that stage goes into, we don't want it to become a problem in the subsequent level of election. So that is something that's not a doubt. Yeah, and for purposes of this meeting, of course, I know it's also being recorded. Yeah, so challenges like accessing the facilities, because some are mounted on stools that are a bit high and becomes hard. And then, of course, generally helping persons with disabilities to have a smooth process, electoral process, and electoral experience. That's training that we give our officials, and I think we will take it up. I have some officers here already who I can see they are noting seriously. But we also call upon the general public to help our communities. Persons with disabilities are people we stay with every day. We help them cross the road. We go them to church. We help them at home. They are members of our communities. They are members of our families. They are our families. So I think we need to work together to make sure they have, a dignified electoral experience so that it does not become a problem. Otherwise, they will not participate in the election, and yet it's a right. And today we are celebrating democracy. Okay. So on the matter of media, use of media, and access and denial and the issues, the challenges that have come up, it is an issue that we've engaged on with Uganda Police, and today we'll have representation also from Uganda Police. How do we enforce the SOPs? Why is there no standardized, approach in that? So the engagement and sensitization of Uganda Police Force continues. It started. The SOPs came out the beginning of August after a consultative process. Activity is already high, and there are many questions. How do we handle this situation? It's like every situation was unique. So we've called both political actors who want to go on media and also engaged with Uganda Police who enforce, so that we move together and do not hinder, exercise of rights, freedoms and rights. But at the same time, also, we achieve the objective of the SOPs, which is to combat the spread of COVID-19. So there's an engagement that's been going on. I believe it has been at a high level, so that we don't get problems at operational level, down in the districts, and we believe that it's going to give us good results. I also look forward to hearing from UPF when they come over here, how they have improved on that area. But I think that is something that has been handled. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul Bukenya, he's the spokesperson of the Electoral Commission. Now, this event today is being funded by the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project. That is the SEPU project in conjunction with the Electoral Commission and the United Nations Development Program, where we are commemorating the International Day of Democracy. Yes, under the theme COVID-19, a spotlight on democracy. And that's why we are here. Let me also bring in our panelists for the day. I'll start with Dr. Monica Masonro. She's the Presidential Advisor on Epidemics and Pandemics. She will take over her seat. Yes, there she is. And yes. We are indeed honored to have you, Dr. Monica Masonro. You can just have a seat right over there. And we also do have Mr. Moses Kafero. Mr. Moses Kafero will be taking the question from Paul Bukenya when he mentioned that Uganda Police Force should actually be giving us an update on what they are doing to ensure that all political parties are allowed to participate in this electoral process. Not what we saw during the primaries where the NRM were allowed to do open rallies, but when an opposition politician is going to a radio station, they are frustrated in that regard. So we shall have Mr. Moses Kafero representing Uganda Police Force. Mr. Moses, are you in the audience? You can take over your seat. All right, as we await on Mr. Moses Kafero, we also do have Mr. Zaidi Mukasa from the National Consultative Forum. He'll be taking over his seat also, Mr. Zaidi Mukasa. And via Zoom, we shall be joined by Dr. Jonas Tegeni Waldemariam. He's the World Health Organization representative to Uganda. Yes, he shall be joining us online via Zoom. And also we shall be having Ms. Helen Kezinwoha. She is the Executive Director, Women's International Peace Center. All right. Amazing. So I think we shall have some opening remarks from Dr. Masonro. Monica.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be part of this discussion today. And before I make my remarks, I would like to be in a room where SOPs are observed. I don't like seeing people's noses out. I don't feel safe. So there are so many people in the room. They have their masks on their chins. We are talking about SOPs. It starts with me. So if we can all cover our noses, and Mr. Moderator, you can speak with your mask on. Okay, thank you very much. As a scientist and at the Center of designing the national response and making sure that Uganda is safe from COVID, we started very early, and there were mixed reactions from different countries. Some countries were postponing elections, and at first we thought Uganda would postpone elections, because when you mix politics with a delicate balance of managing the speed at which COVID spreads in our nation, it becomes very, very complicated. However, once we were told of the implications of not holding elections, scientists engaged in a very, very prolonged, protracted, and delicate discussion, trying to make sure that we keep the democratic processes in Uganda going, while at the same time keeping the country safe. Right from the beginning in our control of the epidemic, the goal was not to prevent the virus from coming, or because that's not possible. However, the goal has always been to control the speed at which the virus spreads, so that we can be able to manage the number of cases which come. So we discussed Ministry of Health and all the science that are involved, and worked with the Electoral Commission as well as the different parties
those who are willing to develop SOPs. However, whereas we began very well in compliance, as we moved along, the population started not to really comply. And there was that disconnect between the population and the implementers or the responders trying to control the epidemic. And the political activity was gaining momentum at a time when there was deterioration in adherence to SOPs. Our observance from other countries that we have studied have shown a sharp rise in number of cases following elections. But we thought that because the elections are coming at a time when a lot more is known about the virus, Uganda would be able to weather this. To our dismay, the politicians, the people who are campaigning, the moment they started the campaigns, they totally disregarded everything that was advised. And it has been heartbreaking for some of us who have worked delicately to protect the population. And then to see this, you know, because we know what's going to happen. And we started warning, and now we are all observing what's happening. Cases are rising sharply, deaths are rising, and I want to state here that the number of cases we see reported are not the total number of cases that are out there. These are just indicative of the trend the disease is taking. There are so many more sick people out there. The number of deaths we are seeing are not the only individuals dying of this disease. They are just an indication. So we are rising sharply as the political process picks up. Unlike other countries where the COVID had not yet spread in the community, in Uganda, the political campaign peak is coming at the time when the disease has taken off in the community. And unless everybody involved takes this serious, we might see a serious disaster in this country post-elections or during the elections. And I have been warning about this. Unless everybody takes this very serious, because we have uncontrolled community spread, we quickly run out of hospital space, and the COVID kills people when they cannot access health facilities. Temporarily in Kampala, after about 2 weeks of no beds, the opening of Nambole has relieved a bit. But that's going to be overrun very, very fast. And we have reports of many regional facilities where we have run out of hospital space. Yet, I firmly believe that working together, trying to uphold the democratic processes in the country, if we all take personal responsibility, take responsibility first for yourself. Some people, and the people who commonly get infected, are those who believe they cannot get infected. So they disobey. They are exceptional. They will leave their nose out. They will leave their mask out. This is my friend. We work together. Those are the people who have been picking and taking to isolation facilities. So the effort now by the government, the president set up a technical intersectoral committee to support the Ministry of Health. It's chaired by Major General Muhesi, and I am his deputy. And we are trying to educate each and everybody. We are reaching out to the political parties. This is non-partisan, we are just Ugandan. We want to train you to take responsibility. As people have gone through the primaries, those have seeded the community. Different communities have now, in fact, now we are picking cases from almost everywhere. Before we started the campaigns for the primary elections, it was mainly Kampala. But now we are picking cases from every district. So you have seeded the community. And as we begin the real campaigns, we are just amplifying. So we are going to reach a state where we are going to reach a peak at the same time as elections. And it's not a threat, I want to say, but especially our candidates, make sure that you are not in the isolation facility when you are supposed to be elected. And many of your people who are voting, many of your voters might be in hospital, even your agents, the ones you have built. So if we can take personal responsibility, each one of us, be responsible for the people, as the gentleman from the Electoral Commission has said, that take responsibility for the people. If we each wear our mask, the mask is now the pivotal tool that we have to protect ourselves. There are many other things, but if you can begin by that one, wear your mask properly. Wearing your mask below the nose is not protective, both to yourself and to the other people around. We know that if everybody wears their mask all the time, properly, without opening your mouth when you're talking to others or talking to the phone, because when you're talking, that's when you are blowing out the virus. You are seeding everywhere. So if we can all wear our mask and manage it judiciously, we can cut the risk of spread drastically. Instead of giving those people 1,000 in the village, why don't you buy them masks? Why don't you buy them masks instead of giving? You are protecting them. You are giving them safer protection. We know that in Uganda, people give money to the voters. Give them a mask. It will be more protective to them in the long run, and it will save their lives. So I would like to call upon us to take personal responsibility. The Intersectoral Technical Committee is available to interact with all the parties, give you a training, you have a better understanding of the disease, so that you can take responsibility because you understand. I would like to thank you. I'll respond to specific questions when time comes.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Masonro. Monica, for that. Yes, she's the presidential advisor on pandemics and epidemics in this country. Let me also take this opportunity to invite, that is Mr. Zaidi Mukasai from the National Consultative Forum to give us a few words on the emerging issues on the enforcement of the standard operating procedures. What is your take on that? And do you believe the standard operating procedures are strong enough or effective to ward off the contraction and spread of COVID-19? And if not, what more needs to be done?
Thank you very much, MC.
All right.
Beforehand, I need to thank the organizers of this. And I think it's a very good signal to political parties and organizations, most especially during this electoral time. Ladies and gentlemen, National Consultative Forum is an umbrella organization of all registered political parties in Uganda. And it derives its mandate from the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda of 1995. And its mandate also is envisaged in the Political Parties and Organizations Act of 2005 as amended. Political parties currently are registered and regulated by Electoral Commission. So when you talk of COVID-19, we have heard of the COVID-19. It's a threatening subject, most especially those who are very keen, those who have seen how it has affected all countries globally. We still have in Uganda here people who still think that there is no COVID-19. I think you have heard of that. Very many people have been arrested and jailed because of such information given to the public. We have not taken COVID-19 seriously. You've heard how the doctor so far, who has actually spoken before me, actually alerting us that before she speaks, we must observe that. Meaning that even up to today, some of us are not taking the COVID-19 seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, as I said, it's a very threatening subject globally, because even up to today, what we call the giant countries are still struggling to get a solution. When it comes to Uganda, we have taken the COVID-19 to be the normal flu. And we have also had some other, should I call them mysteries or what, that the COVID-19 does not affect the black people. We, the black people, we are used to it because it has been with us for quite some time. So, which needs a lot of awareness about the COVID-19. I think the task force where Doctor is a member has not done to the expectations of Ugandans. However, we know there is a saying that prevention is better than cure. On the 6th of July 2020, Electoral Commission came up with guidelines for nominations and standard operating procedures, all geared towards mitigating the COVID-19 efforts before, during, and elections, which included, among others, accessing, as we have heard from the Electoral Commission official, accessing nomination papers from the website, washing hands regularly, wearing the recommended masks, gloves, use of sanitizers, and observing social distancing during political activities. And this was disseminated to all political parties and organizations and other stakeholders. However, much of this effort has been rendered futile by the political parties and organizations during their primaries, especially during the national resistance movement, where the high-profile people did not observe, and the rest of other people. They did not observe any SOPs, any of the SOPs, including the security, the police. I think you have seen the fights. You have seen the congestion. You have seen all sorts of threats, all sorts of whatever you call it during these primaries. And we expected actually to learn from the mother ruling party. Meaning that the best example that they set, the precedent that they set, is likely to be followed by the rest of other political parties and the public. Ministers have had no masks. Ministers have been engaged in bringing people together, not even observing the social distancing, crying for here and there, mobilizing people to fight. So that example is totally bad, and it is set to be followed by the rest of the country. And this time around, we are also waiting to hear from the task force, where Dr. Wizi here, to hear from them the extent of the rate of the contraction and the spread of the coronavirus. And I believe it will be too high this time around. We have not even heard from them condemning such acts that were exhibited during the primaries of the NRM. I don't know whether it is because there were some other people who have impunity, those, I think, I don't know, whether these are the high-profile people that need not to be talked about. They have not even sent any message about what happened. So this is something that we need actually to talk about as Ugandans. So really, in NCF recommends the following, that there should be more voter education in this manner. More voter education about the procedures. Because people are disorganized in the first place. When we talk of scientific election, some of us failed sciences, I think, at O level. But when we talk of scientific election, everyone asks, what kind of scientific election is this? Secondly, recently, I think you have seen the lining up in the primaries of the primaries of the NRM, the ruling party. Children, old people, in a total mess. Everyone together, no distance, no what, hugging, became hugging. So I don't know to what extent this one should be talked about. So it's now the recommendation of NCF that the task force, together with the other stakeholders, should at least come up and rectify the situation. Otherwise, Ugandans are going to die of the COVID-19. So in bigger numbers, we have not actually realized this, because if it was like what happened in Italy and Mexico and other countries, I think everyone now would be knowing what exactly COVID-19 is. So we have not observed the SOPs at all, even to a small rate like this. We have not. There is also another recommendation for civic education by the human rights organizations and other stakeholders. This time, I think the churches cannot come up because they have done their best. But still, there is nothing that, of course, can take place right today because they are not open, and so we can't blame the religious leaders. I don't know who among the Ugandans will come and will be heard by the public about the coronavirus. It's the time of the task force now, where the doctors who know what scientific election, what, they should come up and teach us and educate us about the whole arrangement. Otherwise, we are in a total mess. I think, let me stop there. I thank you very much for you.
Mr. Zaidi Mukasa from the National Consultative Forum, thank you very much. He also reiterated a message that was actually sent by the Presidential Advisor on Epidemics and Pandemics, Dr. Masonro Monica. There could be another wave of the coronavirus if people do not adhere to the standard operating procedures. If you do not wear your face masks like this one, yes, if you do not use a sanitizer like this one at all times, you will be actually exacerbating the spread and contraction of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So something like this could be a very good weapon in your arsenal to ward off the contraction and the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And also social distancing and ensuring that you wear a face mask like this that can cover your nose and mouth at all times. Avoid touching your mouth, nose, and eyes, and that way you can stop the contraction and the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Like Dr. Masonro said, if you do not do that, there could be a second wave of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that has also been reiterated by Mr. Zaidi Mukasa. More Ugandans could die. That figure could skyrocket from 56 to, bigger numbers, from 4,978 positive cases of the coronavirus to maybe 10,000 if you do not adhere to the standard operating procedures. I would like to use this chance to invite the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Simon Mujenyi Biamukama, to take over your seat. I do have a question for you. And also the United Nations Development Program Resident Representative to Uganda, Elsie Atefo, to also take your seat. I have a few questions for you. And I'd also like to shed some light on our online panelists. Dr. Jonas Waldemariam is one of the online panelists that we shall be waiting to hear from him, and also Ms. Helen Kezi Nwoha, the Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. All right, I'm going to start with Justice Simon Biabakama. Justice Simon Biabakama, we noticed a lot of violent tendencies within the NRM primaries, and we also noticed that there was zero adherence to the SOPs. Right now, right here at the Kampala Serena Conference Center Hotel, we want you to help us give us assurance that this won't be replicated on the national stage. What are the pertinent measures you're putting in place to ensure that this time round people adhere to the SOPs? Talking about the situation is one thing, like what we are doing right now, and coming up with pertinent measures is another. So what are some of those measures?
Thank you very much. Mr. Moderator, there are concerns that you're not putting on your mask.
I was.
Put it on.
Purposes of communication.
According to Dr. Masonro, she said you can speak with your mask on.
Put on your mask when you're talking, otherwise you're endangering all of us in the room.
Amina. Right, thank you very much, Dr. Masonro. Now, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, I think you'll agree with me that what we witnessed during the NRM primaries was most unfortunate and regrettable. In the area one of paying scant or little attention to the observance of the SOPs, that was most unfortunate. We have all seen the pictures on our screens, in the media, the general happiness, general mingling, like there's no COVID. Very unfortunate. The other aspect which was unfortunate was the violence that was exhibited in some areas. Again, that was most unfortunate. The combination of violence and non-observance of SOPs spells disaster to our democratic processes and also to our well-being in the midst of this challenge. There have been voices of concern that given what has happened in the NRM primaries, therefore, when we come to the general elections, we are likely to have a replication of those episodes. Let me say this very unequivocally. The question of whether or not we are going to have similar episodes is entirely in the hands of Ugandans. It is a question of our choice. Do we choose to avoid the spread of the pandemic or not? If our choice is to avoid the spread, how are we to do that? How do we begin? What is the starting point? And I think, as Dr. Masonro said, it starts with you and me at an individual level. By you yourself and myself observing the SOPs. And secondly, gently cautioning others who are not following suit to do so. I have said, and I repeat, that what does it benefit us as a commission or as a country that after January or February 2021, we have this exponential increase in the infections and the death rates? Is that the price we are opting for, or in the name of democracy or exercising our rights? Is anything more important than good health or even life? Is any substitute for that or an alternative to that? I don't think there is. So leaders, the problem, the challenge we have, I think, in this country, particularly in some of our political actors, is indiscipline. We know what we ought to do and what we ought to encourage others to do, but we don't. I think the first quality of a leader is to guide the people whom you purpose to lead into conduct that guarantees their safety and well-being, and also that promotes activities that are aimed at improving their lives. So I would like to make this appeal to the political actors, all of you candidates or aspirants who hope to become candidates after nominations. Your first duty is to yourself and to the people from whom you are canvassing support and votes. We are being told that this pandemic is terrible. We are being told that the only way we can resist it is by observing the SOPs. Then why do you allow the people, your supporters, to crowd in such large numbers without cautioning them of the dangers of doing so? We were, before the Electoral Commission came up with the revised roadmap, we first had a meeting with the Minister of Health experts on how we can organize an election in compliance with the constitutional requirements, but at the same time ensure that the people's lives are not put in jeopardy. And one of the things they emphasized was that we need to make people realize that it is not your neighbor or any other person who is going to fight this pandemic. Each one of us has to do that. So the first core point is you and me. But the conduct of some of political actors is utterly disappointing in that regard. So as a commission, we are committed that the only way we can try to mobilize the people of Uganda is to repeatedly urge, extol, and caution the people that either we observe the SOPs or we are finished. And the issue of violence. Violence undermines our democracy. It's a total dead end. It benefits nobody. The outcome of an election is not determined by how many heads or hands have been broken, or how much blood has been spilled, it is determined on the polling station by what is cast in the ballot box. That's what determines who is the winner. Now, how does violence therefore promote this process? How does violence ensure that the people of Uganda are nurturing and improving on their democratic process by choosing leaders in a free and fair contest? Of course, much of the blame goes to the Electoral Commission, that you have not held a free and fair election. But, excuse me, how does the Electoral Commission encourage people to perpetrate or to commit violence? How? If the Electoral Commission has been elaborate in its preparations, has been transparent in informing the populace on each and every activity that is taking place, has invited all people to be included in the process, how do you relate that to the choice of the people to engage in violence? So as far as I'm concerned, in sum total, I can only say that yes, we can have the same violence in 2021 if the people choose to do so. I can also say no, we can avoid that violence again if the people choose not to engage in violence. But my message that I'm sending out to every Ugandan, every person who loves this beautiful country, who cherishes the virtues of our existence, of our communities, of our society, and our well-being, that let us together rise up to join hands. One, to fight the pandemic by extolling each other to observe the SOPs, as Dr. Masonro has done here. She said, please, all of you who are lowering your masks below your noses, cover your noses. That's what we ought to do in a gentle way. And I also want to encourage Ugandans to rise up and say no to violence. This country has had enough share of violence. We have all seen it, maybe for those who are just born recently. But some of us have seen enough share of violence. So in my view, I think it is within us as Ugandans to say no to violence. It is within us as Ugandans to say, yes, we are going to observe the SOPs. Thank you.
All right, that is the Electoral Commission Chairperson, Mr. Simon Mujenyi Byabakama. Right. Now, let me introduce our online panelists. We do have the World Health Organization representative, Dr. Jonas Waldemariam. Yes, he's the representative to Uganda from the World Health Organization, and also Ms. Helen Kezi Nwoha, the Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. There is Mr. Waldemariam. A very good afternoon. Oh, it's still morning time. Wow, I thought it was.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Waldemariam.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yeah, a few things I would like to emphasize is that definitely this pandemic is one of the fastest growing pandemics I've ever seen, reaching almost, when you look at it, it's only 258 days since we first heard about this disease, and it almost affected 29 million people and killed, now approaching to over 920,000 people. For a disease, we also see that in the African continent, we are almost approaching 1.4 million people with 33,000 people who died. Relatively, what is good news for Africa is that in the last 7 weeks, we seem to see a decline. And this is mainly driven by a decline in South Africa, which accounts to almost 70% of the cases, and Nigeria. If we see around Uganda, for example, on September 12th, Uganda happens to be the largest in the Southeast Asia, in the Southeast, in the Eastern Africa community, with 326 cases, while Kenya, which used to have the highest number, was only reported 170 cases. What is striking is that if we look into the evolution of this disease in Uganda, we seem to have been doing well in March, April, May, June, and July. And suddenly we started seeing an increase. And those increases were associated with our opening up. I'm not saying that our lockdown was wrong. Our lockdown was able to prevent the case for significant time. But when we open up, we see a rise everywhere. And I wish I could show you a transparency where we could see cases where, for example, now you can see that the cases in, by the way, can you see the presentation? You can see here that if you take Kampala, with the opening of the economy and later on with the release or the borders moving, we can really see an increase in cases. But even now, in the last week, we see that certain districts are highly affected. Although being led by Kampala, we are seeing a significant increases in other districts as well, like Khartoum, Bukiwe, in Moroto, in Gulu, and Wakiso and Lira show cases of more than 30 in less than 7 days. And this here demonstrates the significance. We were reporting between 30th of August and 5th of September, 739 cases. But the following week, which is from 6th to 12th, we have already 1,132 cases. And we see the number of districts also increasing. And here you see clearly where we see an increase in the red districts, while we see some decrease in some of the districts. My message will be globally as a community and as a society, we have to take 4 steps to come out of this. That we have to prevent amplifications of events. That is by trying to have a very safe gathering of people. And the second part is we have to reduce deaths of the vulnerable group. And this applies to the election as well. If a person is vulnerable, either because of age or because of diseases, we have to see a way that they exercise their right to vote without compromising their vulnerability. So we may have to look into an innovative way of looking how to prevent the vulnerable from dying by ensuring that they are protected. The fourth aspect is the most important one, and that is the message to the community. Every one of us have a responsibility. And those responsibilities are by wearing masks, by ensuring safe distance, and taking measures. And I think we can expect the government to ensure isolating, testing, and caring of case. But the most important case here is the individuals taking responsibility. And my message is COVID is affecting everyone. We are even seeing a number of doctors who died from here. In Uganda, we lost 3 of them. Even within 24 hours, we have 27 health workers. Overall, we have close to 241 health workers which are affected. And this is people who know, and still they are exposed. And you can't, I think the society have to realize that COVID is real, and we are losing people, including the best in the health services. And we have to make sure that we keep wearing masks, physically distancing, hand hygiene, and avoid big crowds, and ensure that we have cover our mouths and noses. But it's not only one of them, it's when we do all of them that we can protect the people.
Indeed.
I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And Dr. Jonas Waldemariam, you work for a global organization that is directly dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. What is your perspective on how Uganda can hold elections in a safe environment?
I think the most important thing is it's not whether Uganda can hold an election or not. That is a given. But making it safe is important. And that is not necessarily the responsibility of government only. It's the responsibility of each and every one of us, political parties, civil societies, partners, and most of all, of the individual, of the community. So each one of us have to wear masks and keep our physical distance. If we do that, an election, a safe election is possible. Otherwise, we are going to get into, as Dr. Monica said, that we are going to get into another climb of numbers. That's why we have this practice. Over.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jonas Waldemariam. He's the World Health Organization representative to Uganda, and that global organization has been at the forefront of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's also bring in Ms. Helen Kezi Nwoha. She's the executive director of the Women's International Peace Center. She's also another online panelist with whom we would like to have a discussion on how best Uganda can hold elections under this COVID-19 pandemic. Ms. Helen Kezi, are you live? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yes, Kezi, the COVID-19 situation presents challenges and opportunities for the state of democracy in Uganda. Now, share with us your perspective on this based on your work with women during this period of Uganda's 2020-2021 election.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, UNDP, for organizing this conference that is enabling us to reflect on the elections that is already happening, and also thinking about it from the perspective of the current COVID pandemic. I think it's very important when we are discussing the implications of COVID within the elections to think about the broader issues that we are dealing with, when we talk about elections. And one of them is the commercialization of elections. We, as the Women's Situation Room and the Women's International Peace Center, monitored the primaries that everyone, have just talked about. And one of the issues we noted is that at the point of voting, we noticed that a number of candidates were distributing items and money, and that actually, also stimulated a lot of excitement among voters who then crowded, around to get a bit of the items that were being distributed. And I want to re-emphasize, what one of the panelists mentioned earlier. Why are you giving voters 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings, when you can actually print or make masks for them so that they can protect themselves, from COVID-19? So our observation was that the irregularities, during the elections also led to a lot of violence. And I heard the commissioner for Electoral Commission saying that, why should we what we benefit from violence. I think everybody knows that we don't have anything to benefit from violence, but when people are aggrieved about a process, then they have the tendency to express, the anger through violence. So I think we need to work on having elections that are transparent, having elections that people are happy with, having elections that do not make people to begin to fight. It's so embarrassing, for you to watch adult men and women, people who are members of parliament, fighting physically, during elections. What does that say to the voters? What does that say to the, to the country and the citizens at large? So we need to find ways that enable elections to take place in ways that is acceptable by everyone. So if we have regulations on how elections should be conducted, why should we allow people to go against those regulations that then make people to question results to the extent that they become violent? And one of the issues we see is people conducting elections as if it is a do or die affair. People were really ready to die. You could see it from the way they were fighting. It didn't matter, So we think that it's very important that, during this process, that the voter education should be escalated by all the bodies that are responsible for doing that. And when I look at that, I would like to suggest that in terms of improving voter education, that we incorporate COVID awareness within voter education. Because, everybody also has the responsibility to make sure that they provide information about how to vote, what is required, but also COVID SOPs is one of the requirements then for us to be able to have elections based on the information we are just getting, both from the Ministry of Health and from the World Health Organization. So the fact that we have irregularities also has the potential to compromise, violence and then compromise the health of the people. I think the other observation that we also we saw was the method of voting, which required people to line behind each other. There was nowhere that the elections took place, the last NRM primaries, that people lined behind observing social distancing. People were packed so close together. A lot of them were not wearing masks. Some of them were wearing masks, but they pulled it below their jaws, which is absolutely not acceptable. So you think about those populations that have gathered to vote, and imagine that if someone within that voting center is infected with COVID, every other person is going to be infected. So I think that we also need, I would like to suggest that the Electoral Commission put in place, some kind of mechanism or restrictions, I don't know, or sanctions for people who do not observe it. I would imagine that if the police stations already had positioning for people to stand, and they have put some white lines about where you should stand, probably people will come and stand according to those directives. But if there was nothing provided, people get excited and they just pile, themselves together and vote. But that also questions, do we need that kind of way of voting in the context of COVID? It's something that, I would like the Electoral Commission to, to throw more light into that, because they have said to us that one of the ways one of the issues, SOPs they have issued is social distancing. So if you have issued social distancing, why should you allow a voting method that does not then adhere to social distancing at the time of voting? Then the other thing we observed was it was so difficult for the police to actually enforce the SOPs during voting. They didn't know what to do. A lot of things got out of hand, and then many times they just had to use tear gas to disperse people. How can we support the police to better use the institution to be able to enforce in ways that protect the rights of individuals and citizens of the country? And my suggestion is this: we need to be able to provide training, and I am happy the Electoral Commission already said that. But in that training, I would suggest that we take into consideration issues of gender, issues of disability, and issues of youth inclusiveness and protection, during the electoral process. so that, you have to be conscious of the population, their different needs, the issues of, older people and people living with disability. Of course, we noted that many of the police stations were overcrowded. I understand when you said, okay, maybe we need to provide spaces where people have enough space. How can I understand that there are no institutions or sites for voting. So the Electoral Commission needs to look for police to place police stations in spaces where there's enough ground for people to spread out. Because if there's not enough ground, then you don't blame people when they pile themselves, together in terms of how, they are going to be voting. The other issues when I listen to the Electoral Commission is, when they talk about wearing masks, when they talk about water and soap, I think about the fact that we take for granted that not everyone can afford soap and water. Not everyone can afford masks.
Right.
I do acknowledge that the government also knows that, and they have said they will provide masks for everyone. But not everyone in Uganda has received the government mask. So are we going to be enforcing something that we were not able to provide? What can we do? What can the Electoral Commission do to make sure that everyone who comes out to vote has those a mask to wear at the polling station in terms of preserving lives? The other is about soap and water. I hear washing your hand before you go in to talk to voters and convince them. And I'm asking myself, is it every household in Uganda that will be able to keep soap and water in front of their household? I don't think so. There are some people who are basically looking for food to eat now. So their priority is absolutely not water and soap. What can we do to support those? And how much more can candidates do within this to be able to provide all of that in all the households where they are going to campaign? So these are some of the things we need to think through, basic issues, when we are talking about how to make sure that people comply. People comply when the things that are needed for them to comply is available and is accessible to them. I'm not sure that, some colleagues have spoken before, people don't believe that there's COVID, and you don't blame them. Some people believe, but life has to go on. If you know someone is going to give you 5,000 shillings if you go to vote and you don't have money to eat at home, you will go to vote so you can get 5,000 and buy food for your children. So there are other dimensions of social issues that we need to look into, before we begin to talk about, how do we make sure, that we address all the issues related to COVID. I would like to suggest for the Electoral Commission to put in place a mechanism, beyond this that we already having, to sensitize the population on the SOPs. And I am wondering if they are able to develop a more robust communication strategy that can look at various, levels. At the village level, you probably will not use a TV, you will not use social media. But in Kampala, yes, you can use the TV, you can use the social media. So what other means can we use to reach people and sensitize them, in terms of what is expected of them, but also incorporate into that civic education?
Okay,
also,
thank you very much,
I think
Kezi.
the political parties, they also have a role to play. We can't leave everything to the Electoral Commission. If the Electoral Commission issued SOPs to political parties, I think it's the responsibility of the political parties to make sure that this information gets to their members and then to the voters. Everyone has to play a part in making sure that, the SOPs reach wider audience. And of course, just like everyone has said, we have responsibilities as human beings to take care of our lives and to protect ourselves. You don't have to wait for someone to tell you to wear a mask. How much do you know and how do you wear it? There's a lot of work that has been done already, by the task force to make sure that people understand how to wear this mask. So I think it's personal responsibility, political party responsibility, Electoral Commission responsibility, and general population responsibility that we can even begin to call ourselves to account. Why should you talk to me when you're not wearing a mask? Wear your mask, for your safety, for my own safety, and for other people's safety. So I will also recommend that the police needs to apply, the electoral laws and guidelines, on electoral campaigns equally for all candidates and for all political parties. We see a lot of, differences in the way they're applying this, and how they disperse crowds. For some people they wouldn't, and others they would. We need to, treat everyone equally, because some of those irregularities also bring tension between candidates, between political parties, and also among the voters themselves. Sometimes it angers them, and some of those lead to the kind of violence that we also experience. Yeah, so I would like to stop there.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Helen Casey Nwoya. She is the Executive Director of the Women's International Peace Center. Well, the Women's International Peace Center is a host of Women Situation Room Coalition of women's rights organizations to address women's safety and security in the pre, during, and post-election period. They are recognized by African Union as a tool conflict mitigation in Africa. But what about the United Nations Development Program? What are they doing to ensure a safe, conducive, and healthy electoral environment right here in Uganda? Let's hear it from Elsie Atafwa, the United Nations Development Program representative to Uganda. What are you, as UNDP, doing to ensure a conducive, safe, inclusive, and fair environment for all citizens to participate?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Let me say how gratified I am for us to have this discussion here. I speak on behalf of the United Nations Development Program, but I also speak on behalf of the United Nations family. As a United Nations family, our mandate really, we are supposed to remain apolitical in circumstances like this. But we have a primary mandate in terms of promoting governance, in terms of promoting peace and security. And when you come back, I'm trying to give some context and where we're coming from as the United Nations family. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goal number 16, it is an enabler for development. In other words, peace and security is a foundation for development. And peace and security, it's therefore something that we take seriously, and this is part of the Charter of the United Nations. Now, with that context, we get involved into this sort of electoral processes based on recommendations from our UN Department of Peace and Security. Now, this is quite important because, again, electoral processes are government processes, and when we come in, we are there to just facilitate a process. So in this regard, what we are doing as a United Nations family, and of which UNDP plays a very strong role in terms of being the, you may call the interlocutor when it comes to issues around elections, and we run about 60 elections in a year supporting many countries, is to do a couple of things. First, I think we've heard so much here today, the need for sensitization, awareness building. This is very important. Part of our work is to really look into issues around, capacity building, ensuring that the information is out there, civic education, voter education. And this project that we are managing together with other UN agencies, UN Women, UN Human Rights, UNESCO, and the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, is exactly to do that, to share information about things like this, like the SOAP. The other dimension to our work is also to be able to promote peace and security. In other words, we try to preempt where potential conflicts could be. And one of the things that we are working on is look at early warning systems, for example. Working with the women groups, working with the religious groups, working with cultural groups, for example, to try and educate their people, to try to pass peace messaging around. And that's a very important component of our work. The third thing that we're also looking at in terms of capacity building, sometimes there are demands on people and institutions. So for example, we're working with the EC, we are working with the police, we are working with judiciary, we are working with the National Consultative Forum, institutions, and helping them in terms of capacity building, targeted capacity building. So for example, when you're supposed to organize training, for example, for the security sector, for example, our colleagues in the UN Human Rights are also working with the police force in terms of looking at the human rights dimensions of the work that we do. And UNDP also works in the sense of, pooling and helping to mobilize resources to support government. So in this particular case, the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project is a basket fund that we manage. And I want to thank our donors again, the government of Norway, Sweden, Austria, Denmark, and Iceland, for funding this, and we have about $6.3 million from these donors to support exactly the kind of things we're talking about. Now, what is also important, which I wanted to highlight, is that we also see the interconnections between health and development. And the reason why we're focusing on COVID and also trying to push the agenda on the SOAPs is that you cannot decouple development from health. In other words, if we have a spike, like the doctor said, if things become unbearable, we are going to erode the very development gains that we have as Uganda. And as a United Nations family, we recently launched an assessment on the socio-economic impact of COVID, okay? Now, we already see poverty levels increasing. We are already seeing that we cannot attain some of the sustainable development goals. We are already seeing that we've lost so much from the tourism sector, billions of dollars. Now, the last thing you want is that for an economy that has been impacted by COVID, then again, we conduct an election that is not savvy, that is not responsive enough, and then we go back again in poverty levels down. So people need to see the interconnection between what we are doing and overall development, the interconnection between what we are doing, peace and security, and also the interconnection between what we are doing and the post-COVID recovery period. Because Uganda is now trying to rebuild, trying to recover, and we are all helping the country to do that. Again, the last thing we want to do is to erode the gains. So for us as a UN family, and I'm glad our colleagues from UN Women, for example, is here, you know, we're trying to make sure that the vulnerable groups, especially the youth, the women, the persons with disabilities, the elderly, the leaving no one behind agenda that we talk about. When we come into the space of elections, it's also very important that we protect those people, we protect that space, at the same time that they can be inclusive and transparent elections and to get them involved, we need to be able to protect them. So for us as UNDP, ours, together with the wider UN family, is an apolitical space. I wanted to highlight that. Ours is there to support in capacity building, facilitation, awareness raising, and also ensure that together and collectively, you know, we can work together to support the agenda and the governance agenda of the country, which remains an enabler when it comes to issues around development.
Thank you very much, Atafua Elsie, the UNDP resident representative to Uganda. Let me also bring in Dr. Masonro Monica. She is the presidential advisor on epidemics and pandemics. Dr. Masonro, we were getting information that there were issues of wrong results. People who are negative testing positive, and people who are positive testing negative. And there's also a contentious issue of overcrowding at Mulago. Hospital beds are filling up. Help us understand the situation at Mulago Hospital.
Thank you very much. The two issues are related. Right from the beginning, when we laid down the national strategy for managing the COVID pandemic, one of our goals was to avoid being overwhelmed. Because once you are overwhelmed, your capacity to cope with the pandemic is overrun. And then at that point, you lose control of quality. So starting with the last one, I already told you that actually the situation around Kampala had improved over the past few days because we've been working on creating beds in Nambole to evacuate. Otherwise, the hospital beds throughout the country are full. We had a period of 2 weeks where we had nowhere to put patients who test positive. And that, again, fuels the epidemic. Because if you test positive and you cannot be taken away under isolation, you're sick, you infect those who are caring for you. Also, we started to see a spike in death because people test positive, but they cannot access the care which they need, these are the very situations that we were avoiding, that you'd realize that in the first part of the pandemic, when people were sick, they were detected early, they all had hospital beds, some were even dancing, in the isolation facilities, and people were laughing, there is no COVID. But putting them away could achieve two things. One, putting them in the isolation facility helps monitoring them early, detecting when somebody is deteriorating early, and treating them, and we are not having deaths. But the moment we have so many cases, then we don't know, we don't have that facility. The second is that you put them there, they get rid of the virus in their bodies without infecting many other people. So once you reach a certain threshold, when your capacity is overrun, then that's where the damage comes. So from the beginning, we were working to contain the number of cases below our threshold. Our testing capacity, right now you notice that when a specimen is taken, you could take up to 7 days before you get results, because the labs are full of specimen and the capacity we have is overrun. The issue of mixed up results, I cannot authoritatively speak on that because I have not personally analyzed it. In principle, the tests we use are not 100%. So sometimes, occasionally, you'll have very small numbers of false positives or false negatives. That is acceptable. But I cannot authoritatively speak about mixed up results because I have not been in that space, so I cannot give an explanation. But avoiding being overrun. And if we get overrun, then you reach a situation, in many countries you saw, especially in Europe, they were choosing who gets treated. And they were using, some countries were using age as a cutoff. If you are above 60, you can, let's try to save these who are younger, who have a longer life. But since we have come, and it can be confirmed by some of my fellow professionals from WHO, we are now getting evidence that is not only people dying, but individuals who get infected with COVID, even the asymptomatic ones, the ones who don't show symptoms, they have long-term effects on them, on their bodies. And this is a very, it is a very serious situation. People who are recovering from, they had just mild, they are taking very long to recover. And this is a phenomenon we are just studying now. WHO and all other agents, we are now starting to study that although the younger people thought, oh, even if I get COVID, I'll just recover quickly, and incidentally, it doesn't seem to be so. So we need all to take caution. We all need to make sure that we don't expose ourselves. There are people who are deliberately thinking for them, me, COVID, it can't get me. Even if it gets me, I'll be okay. And they continue saying, oh, there is no COVID, even when people are dying. Even when some people have died, I've seen Ugandans trying to deny and refuse results. Somebody recently, I saw on social media, who are saying they went to a military hospital. In this country, in Uganda, it is only the government laboratory system. And very few, I think right now, 2 laboratories that can confirm COVID. So you cannot go to any lab and say that you have confirmed it is not COVID. And there is no interest in the government system to give you a wrong result. There is no interest in that. So it is for our sake that you get to know.
Yes.
It is for your sake that you get to know the truth and protect others from getting. But more so, I want to emphasize, if we all take responsibility, the cases will remain few, the hospital beds will be there, but if we are careless, we are filling up our capacity very, very fast. I'm actually worried that by early October, we are going to see a very new, because people are getting infected now in this primary election, are going to start showing up by end of this month and early October. So we are going to see a very sharp rise, and what the government will do is take care of yourself at home.
Dr. Masonro, the Presidential Advisor on Epidemics and Pandemics, she contends that there could be a skyrocketing rise of coronavirus cases like we've witnessed during the primaries. There was zero social distancing, zero wearing of masks, and so forth. So she says on the national stage, the people who got infected during the primaries, they might infect others on the national stage as we proceed with these elections. Let me also bring in Mr. Zaidi Mukasa from the National Consultative Forum, who would like to know what more needs to be done to stem the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, better known as COVID-19 disease. What more needs to be done to stem the spread of this virus?
Thank you very much. I think, as others have said, one is to make sure at least voter education is enhanced, and civic education as well by the concerned bodies. And we need also to urge Ugandans, fellow Ugandans, to take up the advice from the Ministry of Health and other bodies. And another thing is that we need to learn from examples, because we have seen when the president actually was giving his last speech, he gave an example of a film where people were dying and people were running away, people were, getting tired of burying others and what. So I think we need to take up examples. And another thing is to urge the authorities also to consider factors, political factors. Nowadays, you have seen at least a little about the NRM with that white color of the fumes from the what do we call this, tear gas. But you are yet to see the other mixed up with pepper, that one of pink and blue, when the opposition is engaged. So we need to have that harmonized position whereby all Ugandans are also given a chance, an opportunity to exercise their rights. Indeed. The opposition, of course, is vulnerable, as you have heard, that when it comes to their time, you are going to see a twist of events. Things are going to turn around, things are going to become, so chaotic, the situation is going to be so worse. So we need to urge our fellow Ugandans that we are all one, we are all Ugandans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank Zaidi. Now, before I open up the floor to a plenary discussion, yes, you can be jotting down some of those questions you want to fire the panelists up here. I'm going to engage Justice Simon Byabakama, the Electoral Commission chairperson. And as I do that in the interim, you can jot down a few questions. I'm going to open the floor in the next 5 minutes. But as I do that, let me first engage Mr. or Justice Simon Mujeni Byabakama. Justice would like to know, we haven't explored how COVID-19 has affected the electoral process in Uganda. We've talked about a lot, but we haven't explored the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the electoral process. I don't want that to get lost in translation, so I'll give you 5 minutes to explore that.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, COVID-19 impacted upon our roadmap in the sense that we lost useful time. You recall when we rolled out this roadmap in December 2018, we did highlight the various activities that would take place right from March 2019 up to polling day in January or February 2021. Now, we lost April, May, and June because of the lockdown. Definitely, it impacted upon us. And remember, some of these activities cannot be completely erased or be done away with. They are enshrined within the legal framework. You have to conduct them in order to ensure that you have a credible, free, and fair election. So the remaining period that we had from 16th of June up to polling is the period within which we are operating, and we're ensuring that those activities that we ought to have undertaken between April and June, we cram them in this remaining period. So that is one impact. And secondly also, we have had to revise the way we do things. Most of our activities are interactive with various stakeholders. Our voter education, which is meaningful and appropriate, is one which is done by interacting with the voters at ground level and whatever level. Now, because of the risks involved with gathering people in large numbers in one place, we have had to scale down on that kind of engagement. Although in our SOPs, we did indicate that you can have regulated small meetings where the SOPs can be appropriately observed. But in the main, we have also had an impact. Now, let me probably use this time to respond to some of the issues that were raised by Ms. Helen Kezenova, I think, the Executive Director of Women International Peace Center, because she raised some of issues which were specifically aimed at the Electoral Commission. Now, first of all, the polling for the general elections, that is in next year, is by universal adult suffrage, and that is a secret ballot. And that one is at designated polling stations where the voters allotted or assigned to that polling station will come to cast their vote. Now, unlike the NRM primaries where voting was by lining up, this one is a secret ballot, and polling starts at 7 up to 4 p.m. And therefore, the voters traditionally, ordinarily, they come in trickles, maybe 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. They cast their vote and go out. So we do not anticipate the kind of challenges the NRM party had in their primaries, where you have to gather all the voters in one location because voting is by lining up. At that polling station, those OPs, we have indicated that we shall have the hand washing measures. We shall ensure that people put on masks and also that they social distance. We shall ensure that we do not allow overcrowding at a polling station, in the queue at a polling station, and that even those at a polling station, the limited numbers at a polling station, observe social distancing. Now, on the question of whether people will be able to have masks, we are in discussions with the Ministry of Health, the National Task Force team, to ensure that all voters approaching polling stations have masks, because we understand government undertook to provide those masks. The Electoral Commission may not be able to do that because we do not have the budget for that. But we are working hand in hand with the Ministry of Health to ensure that these are observed. So in our view, as the Electoral Commission, we can competently and effectively manage a polling station come 2021, where polling starts from 7 to 4 p.m. and people come in, cast their vote, and then they go away. Of course, we shall discourage the crowding of people, of voters at a polling station. We shall encourage as much as possible our people to return to their homes. Now, the other issue Helen raised was that not everybody can afford water. In the process of gathering signatures by the candidates, because it's a requirement of the law that if you must gather signatures of supporters to support your candidature. Now, I was in the first phase of the lockdown. I was held up in the village, in my village. And for the 1 month I was there, I happened to move around. But what struck me was that at least every household, they had a small container of water and some piece of soap to welcome you to their compound. Even the poorest of the poor, they could do this. In my own view, the levels of sensitization and awareness at the beginning were much higher in our communities. But now, if you go to many homes now, you don't see that. So I think not only Minister of Health, but all of us, particularly the political leaders, we need to reincarnate the message of observing the SOPs. Because I tell you, every homestead I went to or passed by, you'd see a water container and soap. But now, it's not true. That's not what's happening. So I think we need to get back and keep reiterating this message. Indeed. And actually, if, for instance, the data Dr. Monica is giving us here, if it could be aired out to the people and tell them, look, in the first 3 months of the lockdown, this was our situation. Since we eased up, this is the position. These are the days. You know, people will wake up, will awaken and say, oh, this thing is really serious. So we better get back to the basic concept of observing the SOPs as we did need in the first place. Now, on the issue of violence and relating it to the assumed or presumed lack of transparency, I do not think so, Helen. Look, for instance, take the case, the evil of commercialization or bribing of voters. Do you also attribute that to lack of transparency in our electoral processes? No, I think it is the psyche in our country that look, we can take shortcuts, we can adopt some of these measures in order to achieve our ends. If we can start with the levels of discipline, decency, and respect for systems and legal frameworks, I think to us that will be a big yes.
Well, thank you very much, Justice Simon Biabakama. If you can replace discipline, if you can if you can replace complacency with discipline, we can be able to stem the spread and contraction of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The plenary questions. My audience, are you ready? Do you have any questions for the panelists? I'll start with you there. Okay. There's a mic in your midst, I believe. Go ahead. We have less than 20 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm Sam Gombia, Deputy Mayor, Kampala Central, where we are here, and I represent people living with disabilities. I wasn't convinced well with the EC spokesperson on issues concerning PWDs, and I'm bringing it on board that people living with disabilities have not been catered for. They have been left completely outside this. First and foremost, we have to consider the types of disability that we are talking about. We have little people who are shorter, that they can't access the facilities, hand-washing facilities. And then we also have those who do not have limbs. They don't have legs, but some facilities we open by our food, but they can't access that. And in moving up and down, we use our limbs, hands, and the surface to help us move up and down. But the issues, if we leave issues of minorities, we are not going to achieve, Doctor, a lot out of this. Madam Helen has talked about it, and also Dr. Jonas has talked about. Let us look into the vulnerables. PWDs are the most vulnerable people when it comes to COVID-19. So I beg, let us not just talk, but let us walk the talk in order to help our people living with disabilities. Thank you.
And your name?
Sam Gombia.
Sam Gombia, thank you very much. Sam Gombia is looking for tangible measures that can be put in place to offer reprieve to the PWDs and not mere talking. Well, I think, Bukenya, you shall address that later on. We do have, you are next, go ahead. Your name first?
Thank you very much. My name is Eddie Kainda, Alliance for Finance.
Does he have a microphone?
Eddie Kainda. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Eddie Kainda.
Yes. This goes to the chairperson of the EC and Dr. Masonro. We seem to see a delicate balance between science, politics, and economics. And most especially for persons or the politicians that have opted to use money as the preferred choice of campaigning. At the polling station, we see voters crowding to pick cash from either the agents of the politicians or the politicians themselves. And they're putting these guys at a very delicate health issue. And the point is, at what point can the EC, for example, disqualify such a person? And then to Dr. Masonro,
bribery.
At what point do we see that task force headed by yourself or your committee advise the president and the powers be that this is a dangerous trek that we are heading to? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Politicians who give out money, at what point are they penalized? Thank you very much. And we also have an online panel that has a few questions. Can you present them? The online panelists that have questions. Okay, as we await on some of the online panelists, let's get back into our audience. Who else has a question? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is Daniel Luba.
Yes, Daniel.
Justice, you showed us the ability to manage violence and enforcement of SOPs during polling, but you didn't specifically talk about during vote counting. We witnessed a lot of violence during the NRM primaries, especially at the vote counting. People would get so excited and end up fighting. So I think we need to come up with measures to ensure that even during vote counting, the SOPs shall be enforced. Then to Dr. Masonro, Helen raised an issue of some communities or some households failing to afford water and soap. Is it possible to promote other alternatives to soap in terms of hand washing, say locally available, say maybe using ash? What is your advice on that? Thank you.
So Mr. Daniel Uber is looking for alternatives to water and soap in areas where people don't have the same, and he's also calling for SOPs during the vote counting. Another one, go ahead, sir. Your name first.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Johansson Arhem. I represent the Embassy of Sweden, one of the countries which is supporting the SEPU project.
Amazing.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for very, very interesting and important messages. Particularly, I have a question for Justice Byabakama. And I realize that this is kind of mentioning the elephant in the room. We are in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic. It's a very delicate situation where you have to weigh democracy, health, and ultimately life of your citizens. At which point would you say, as the caseload is rising quickly and the healthcare system is being put under pressure, at which point would you say that it would be time to postpone the elections altogether? I mean, this must have been in the discussions at the Electoral Commission, and it would be interesting to hear the reasoning that you've had internally. Thank you.
And for purposes of gender balance, can we get a lady? Where are the ladies? The ladies must be having pertinent issues that they want to be discussed. Remember, there was a lot of violence within the NRM primaries, and according to some of the political experts I was talking to, they were saying this can actually scare the women from participating in this electoral process. So where are the women, and what are your concerns? Okay, another gentleman. Go ahead, sir. Your name?
I'm Osman Tali, Deputy Mayor of Aga Division 1. It goes to Zaid Mukasa from the National Consultative Forum, because he mentioned in his presentation a line that things are going to turn chaotic. I think we shouldn't preach doom to our country. We should all preach that we are going to have a peaceful election, and we should encourage the masses not to engage into violence, because election taking away the lives is not good for our country. So in whatever way, we should always talk positive about the elections. And we are going to have a peaceful election, a peaceful process, and it's us who are going to do it as Ugandans, and Uganda is going to witness that if we all engage in this engagement. Two, to Dr. Masonro, I'd like to know Dr. Masonro, because in the president's speech, he mentioned that once somebody dies of COVID, you are buried there and then. But of recent, we've seen somebody in our country who is confirmed that he died of COVID-19, but the body is being kept for a whole week. We've not seen the family being taken to quarantine centers. What is the special, are there people who are given special status when they die of COVID-19 and they're not buried there and then? So we'd like to know them. Again, to Dr. Monica, you mentioned of the implication of not holding elections. We'd like to know those implications, because you thought at first that of postponing the elections So when you weighed the implication, you said you're going to go ahead and hold these elections. What are some of these implications?
All right.
And where did you consult us on this issue? Thank you very much.
Okay, Tali. Another question? Go ahead, sir. Wait, you had a question? A lady? Oh, there's a lady right over there. Go ahead.
My name is Nabia Mariam.
Hello,
I'm
Mariam.
a student at Makerere University, College of Medicine. We've been working with the UBC, trying to look at patients who have recovered from COVID-19, and we realize they face a lot of stigma. So we are wondering, have they put anything in, like to try and help these people to exercise their right to vote? Because since they are being discriminated upon, like so much, they may fear to go out there and cast their vote. So is there any solution that can be done about that? Thank you.
All right. Let's start with Mr. Paul Bukenya. You had a question. You can come closer. About the PWDs. Someone was not satisfied. Mr. Sam. Yes, Gombia. He was not satisfied with your response as far as persons with disabilities are concerned, accessibility issues, and so forth. All right, take over.
Sam, greetings. Sam and I grew up together in a small town out of Kampala. Yeah, I said that we were taking lessons, of course, and in our guidelines, and like I mentioned, the SOPs, particularly for polling days, are not entirely out at this moment. Like we said, the SOPs I presented covered pre-nomination, nomination, and campaigns. But of course, we've already had some levels of elections for special interest groups, and more so involving persons with disabilities. So we are still organizing elections which will involve persons with disabilities. So there are lessons that have been picked, and I think they'll be taken. But as part of our training, we always have a section and consideration for attending to special needs of persons with disabilities. So I think it requires us now to modify that area as well to reflect the special and the unique challenges that COVID-19 presents. Otherwise, under our polling guidelines, ordinarily, we do provide for special care and attention to persons with disabilities. They do not line up, for example. They are given first priority when it comes to polling, just like weak persons who may be weak, the elderly, the sick, and expectant mothers. So I think that is an area that we will just now bring to reflect and consider COVID-19. And particularly the hygiene, the hygiene practices. And also, like I mentioned, the sensitization of the communities, because there are some special, unique circumstances that require you actually to come to the polling station with perhaps someone from home. And that is the message we will keep sending across, that please bring those people, and you may require attention that probably the 4 or 5 officers whom we have at our polling station cannot leave the stations to come and attend to you. So then we go back to the community to be part of the process to make the electoral experience not a burden to you. But certainly it's going to be addressed in our training for polling day. Sure. Good. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Paul Bukenya, the spokesperson for the Electoral Commission. Eddie Kayinda also had a question for Mr. Byabakama. Overcrowding of people to pick cash, issues of bribery. At what point are politicians penalized?
Thank you very much. Maybe let me also tackle the question that Sam raised.
On PWDs.
On PWDs. Okay. We have had various interactive engagements with the representatives of the organizations representing PWDs. Recently, we had a team led by the Executive Director of Equal Opportunities, and part of the issues that we canvassed in our engagement is what Sam is alluding to. We do recognize the peculiar challenges of PWDs, and we have taken note of the fact that there are some who may not be able to access the raised hand-washing equipment at a polling station. I think we take cognizance of that. We should apply measures to put it down. But let me also talk generally about the nature of our polling stations. Our polling stations in this country are generally held in open places, which are generally easily accessible by all manner of voters. And one of the things we take into consideration is ease of access, not only for the able-bodied, but also for those who are not. But you know, some of these challenges are peculiar, pertaining to the area where the polling stations are located. For example, if you go to some of these places in, I think, southwestern Uganda, which are hilly and so on, or even in the Elgon region, which are mountainous. So these are peculiar challenges which the Commission has to try and cope with, because they are not of our making. But we endeavor as much as possible to locate a polling station in an area which can easily be accessed. But we continue to recognize the peculiar challenges our brothers and sisters who are of the PWD category face, and we, as a commission, we also recognize they have a right to participate equally like any other Ugandan, and we are taking measures, working hand in hand with their representatives to address them. Now, on the issue of dishing cash, we very well know that bribing of voters is a crime. It's an electoral offense. The only challenge we have is that our laws are not put into application. They are not enforced, they are not applied. How can someone be seen by everyone dishing out money at a polling station and no action is taken? Why do you wait for the Electoral Commission? All of us as citizens, when you find someone committing a crime, do you pass by him or her because the crime is not being committed at your house? In our African culture, you raise an alarm, and this fellow is apprehended. Why do we encourage some of these ills to perpetuate our electoral processes? And we look at them as normal. Then you blame the Electoral Commission? For goodness sake. Each one of us has a role to play to ensure that we want our politics to be as clean as possible and our elections to be as credible as possible. Because bribery dissoils our democratic credentials. And you look at the cost. Since we came, my commission came into office in January 2017, we have held a number of by-elections arising out of court decisions annulling or cancelling the victory of the person who was sworn in Parliament. Reason, there was evidence proved in the petition by the petitioner that this victor or the winner bribed voters. And how much? 10,000 shillings, 20,000 shillings, 50,000 shillings. They ordered for a repeat of the election, which costs 700 million shillings, 500 million shillings. Surely, don't you think we all have a responsibility to ensure that we stamp out this kind of wastage of national resources on someone who deliberately and intentionally bribes voters? So to me, it is our collective responsibility that when we see these ills or evils taking place in our electoral processes, we must tackle them head on. Let us report to the perpetrators, to the police, and let the police and the court entities take them on. Now, on the issue of, just a minute, on the issue of vote counting, we have said one of the measures we have put in place is to discourage crowding at a polling station. Once you have cast your vote, you are advised to go back home. Counting of votes can take place well in the presence of the candidates' agents. Candidates' agents are there to ensure that everything is moving according to the book and that there is no disadvantage of a candidate over another or advantage of one candidate for another, or that even the counting of votes is correctly done, and the results are correctly entered on the declaration of results form.
Right.
So we do not need people. Now, there's one question which the Swedish representative
postponement of the election.
Yes, or at what time can we say, in the midst of this unprecedented pandemic, at what stage can the EC say, we cannot do it? I have said before on other fora, and I repeat, it is not within the Electoral Commission to say we cannot do it. Let me use the similitude of a pilot. I do not know whether the pilot has it within his powers to say, I cannot take off, or he has to be advised by other experts who manage other processes connected to the flight that it is impossible for you to take off on this flight. So in our view, we have said the powers of saying we cannot hold an election are not within the Electoral Commission. They lie with other agencies. When we are advised accordingly, we shall inform the country. Thank you.
Well, that is the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Simon Mujenyi Byabakama. Well, thank you very much for that submission. Let me also bring in Dr. Masonro Monica. She is a presidential advisor on epidemics and pandemics. We had a question from Daniel Uba. He was talking about alternatives to water and soap. Can we use ash? And you also have Ntale, who was saying there is a case of bodies being kept, COVID-19, victims of COVID-19, their bodies being kept for a long time and not for a long time. So what are the implications of that? And someone else was asking here, what are the implications of not having an election? Yes.
Thank you very much. I think I'll begin with the last one, since the Electoral Commission. I think the body of scientists, we were advised by the laws of the country and the possibilities which were there. It needs to be realized that we as scientists and technical people, we give technical advice. We make recommendations. Now, there are other levels which make the final decisions, which are the policymakers. So our role on the task force is to give advice. And what we are given, the question we are given is what we address. So when it was put to us, that according to the laws, I'm not a lawyer, but it was put to us that we need to have the election. We tried to come up with the best option and asked the people, are you able, the people who are playing, the Electoral Commission, the Electoral Commissions of the parties, are you able to manage with this? And we give them the recommendations. We don't make the decisions. So as we see the cases rise, every time we advise the relevant stakeholders and say, this is what's going to happen. Like I'm advising you now. This is what's going to happen. Now I can't be responsible now to say, I should be the one making your decision. So our work is to advise and put the facts and the implications before the policymakers. We help them to think through, then when they analyze that, and where many, as somebody put it, we have the political, we have the health, we have the economy, and try to balance those and make decisions. But in all these decisions, we count on the response of the people. If the people can respond positively, because in all these decisions, opening up the economy, opening up public transport, we counted on the fact that people will see the danger of not observing these SOPs on their health and the implications of being kept locked down. So that's what we do, and we are always making recommendations. Some are adopted as they are, some are modified. So I cannot say that this is the time, but a time can come, as scientists, we will make a recommendation if it does and say, continuing now can be dangerous. But whether that can be practical, it's not clear. The other question was ash. To this point, I don't have any evidence that ash kills the virus.
Well, at least thank you for putting that in perspective.
Yes.
I think he got that message. Ash is not an alternative. We shall continue using water and soap and sanitizers, just like this one. Simple sanitizer like this one can help you ward off the contraction and spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Let me use this opportunity to bring in Mr. Fred Moya from the Electoral Commission. But before I do that, Mr. Fred Moya, there was a question from Monica. She was talking about stigmatization. Yes.
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
We know that we've learned a lot about COVID. When a person has just died, an individual has just died of COVID, we are even able to pick a specimen from that person, meaning the person has the virus. But evidence now shows that that level goes down. However, chances are that individuals who have been with this person are already infected. So there is danger still in crowding around burying that body. So sometimes when the body is kept for long, it actually, and usually it will be disinfected, and so the danger directly from the body goes down. The danger from the body being infectious. We still encourage SOPs. There are SOPs for burial, but the chances are that the very close individuals are already infected, and people gathering around comforting those people are likely also to be infected. So that is why at some point we allowed dead bodies now to start coming in, people who had died from out, because studies had shown that these bodies, as a source of the virus directly, it goes down. But the recommendation is the bodies are put in a body bag, which is a plastic covering which doesn't allow fluids to come out, and can be kept, and no touching. Those SOPs can help. Yeah.
Dr. Monica Masonro, the Presidential Advisor on Epidemics and Pandemics. We are running out of time, and it's one thing to talk about problems, and it's another to offer recommendations. Let me use this opportunity to bring in the Electoral Commission representative, that is Mr. Fred Moya, to give us a presentation on the action points and the way forward. Mr. Frederick Moya. Are you exhausted?
Less. Thank you very much, all the eminent people here and all of you here present. I take this opportunity to present the wrap-up of the recommendations that seem to be coming through with regard to the discussion we have been holding today with the pertinent issue of COVID-19 in relation to the elections that we are going to hold 2021. Which has the responsibility of controlling COVID-19 starts with you and with me. And also that we should emphasize the issue of controlling the indiscipline, especially of those in the political class who have the trust of so many people. And if we do not give direction to these people, it would mean that everybody or most of the people would be misled. So it's important for us to take responsibility for the protection of ourselves and those that are around us. Secondly, there was the question of whether we should have the election at all. And it has come out clear that it shouldn't be the question. The question should be, can we do it safely? In other words, we should make sure that while we are doing this general election, we do it safely by enabling people to gather safely, and also by the protection of those who are most vulnerable. That is like the people with disabilities, older persons, people with pre-existing conditions, and people in that kind of category. There was an issue that came out regarding violence. And it was made clear that violence undermines our democracy. And an election outcome should not be determined by the by how much blood is shed and how many limbs are broken, but it should be determined by the ballots that are cast at each polling station and by the aggregation of those ballots to determine a clear winner. So we should avoid violence. The other issue was regard to the police, and there were two issues in this regard. One is regard to the method of police controlling crowds, that the police should control crowds, but also ensure that they protect those who are vulnerable in the process. The method of control should protect people. Although the police has the responsibility to enforce law and order, they should do it in such a way that protects those who are most vulnerable in society. And this should be done by support through the development partners and government and citizens at large to provide training to the police force. Another issue regarding police is to encourage the police to apply the Ministry of Health standard operating procedures and the guidelines and the laws they are attached equally and evenly across the population and across the political divide, to avoid being perceived to be biased against one group or the other. The issue of commercialization of elections has come out strongly, and it has been realized that the distribution of items creates a lot of excitement, creates a lot of congestion, makes people to gather in big numbers, sometimes to fall upon one another in a way of accessing whatever is being distributed, be it money or other resources. So it is important that every citizen takes the responsibility to fight the psyche of believing that they must be given something in order to elect somebody into political office. And also to talk to those who are in the political offices and those who are vying to make sure that they respect the law of the land, because it is clearly stated that you cannot bribe your way into a political office. And it has come out most clearly that citizens should also be active in the enforcement of this law, because the citizens are everywhere. The police cannot be everywhere. And this can only be stopped by the citizens taking responsibility, because they have the responsibility and also the right of citizens' arrest of anyone who is doing something that is akin to breaking of the law, which bribery is actually against the laws of the land. Next is the protection and inclusiveness of the vulnerable with regard to gender, disability, the youth. Specifically, the issue of helping those persons living with disability to access facilities where elections and other electoral activities are being conducted. The persons with disability should be given special care, given priority, and given access and assistance in order for them to be able to access the facilities that we provide for them. In a case which has come out profoundly regarding those who are suffering from dwarfism, it has become pertinent that we create some kind of solutions that are ingenious and can be used to protect their rights and their interests, maybe by installing pedestals or by volunteers propping them up and assisting them to exercise their rights, but while protecting their health at the same time. We talked about interrogating the mode of elections, that the mode of elections by lining up behind a preferred candidate may actually need to be an issue for national interrogation and national debate. in order to make sure that while you lined up behind the candidate, we make sure that you are safe, but also that the democratic process that is engendered through that process is effective, made more effective probably than it already is. Second last is that political parties and churches should promote voter education and also the need to provide information to those people whom they live with and interact with. For instance, we know that right now the churches have been closed, but still these people have influence over millions of people. And this message can be taken more seriously when it goes through that line. But not excusing the Electoral Commission and all the other organizations like Human Rights Commission who are responsible for voter education and civic education, and abdicating and removing them from the role of doing what they are supposed to do and they are mandated to do according to the law. And probably it is important that our media organizations also work together with these organizations for that to be achieved. And lastly, we need to promote the culture of transparency by all parties, political parties, political organizations, by individuals who are participating in the election, in order to make sure that people believe in the elections, and when they are defeated, they have the culture of accepting a result and moving on and waiting for another 5 years or so in order for them to have another go at it and probably make it out victorious. Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies.
And thank you to Mr. Fred Moya. We are going to get some closing remarks from the United Nations Development Program, and later on, Justice Simon Mujanyi-Byamukama will also give us his parting shots before we go for lunch in Victoria Gallery. But first, let me have the United Nations Deputy, the United Nations Development Program Deputy Resident Representative, and that is Ms. Sheila Ngatia, to have some parting shots right here on the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to everybody. It has been a long morning, but I think a very interesting and exciting morning, and I want to appreciate you all for staying the course and being part of this, and also to all those who are joining us virtually from Uganda and outside Uganda, we appreciate. We are coming to the end of this year's event to mark the International Day of Democracy. And this has been a partnership between the Electoral Commission, the United Nations family in Uganda, including UNDP, UN Women, UNESCO, Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, and the Resident Coordinator's Office. I am sure you will have been very interesting, very frank issues raised in a very frank, straightforward manner to our experts. You know, very also honest, frank responses that have been given. And we appreciate that because this is an unprecedented time. And as we are counting 4 months to the general elections, we have to reflect on the last weeks, the events of the last few days, and to see what lessons have we learned. What is it that we can put in place so that as we go ahead, we manage the electoral process, and we manage the situation of COVID-19 so that it does not impact us in a much more devastating manner. I really want to appreciate, the great panelists, and I'll ask that you give a warm round of applause to really the interventions that we have heard from all the different, representatives of various institutions, critical stakeholders, our experts, including also those who joined us, virtually. And I think the key question, that has really been given to us all today is, how can we make the electoral process safe? How do we reduce the risk of spreading COVID? How do we facilitate the inclusion? Ensure that we respect for the rule of law and we apply it equally across the board? How do we promote peace, security, non-violence? We have seen very terrible incidences, including what happened yesterday, which was a shocking event. Violence against children that must not be condoned by anybody. How do we address this? I think the key message that has also come out from all the speakers, and that was really very well articulated by the chairman, by the UNDP resident representative, Ms. Elsia Tafua, by Dr. Monica, by the WHO representative also, and all the other speakers from National Consultative Forum and Ms. Helen, that this is the responsibility of all of us, every person and every institution in Uganda, that it is not only the responsibility of the government of Uganda, it is not only the responsibility of the Electoral Commission. And this message must go out to all the corners of this country, in all the languages, so that everybody understands it is a collective and an individual responsibility, so that we can mitigate against the impact of COVID-19 in Uganda. Safety starts with you and I. The responsibility is all of us. And this is why this was such an important a theme as we mark the International Day of Democracy. This is a day that is celebrated across the world, the 15th of September every year. And it is not by accident that the theme was chosen this year to reflect on COVID-19, Spotlight on Democracy. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as we leave this forum, let us take away this key message. This is the responsibility of each and every one of us. Let us be ambassadors to spread this message. Let us be ambassadors to communicate. And let us really observe the COVID SOPs. I would want to draw your attention that in today's newspapers, there is an insert where there has, the Electoral Commission has provided the roadmap for the 2021 general elections, and also the SOPs, and also a summary roadmap. This is also available on the EC website and on the website of UNDP and other UN agencies. Please let us ensure that we create awareness on this, and we spread the message that this goes out really to all parts of the country and to all our partners. This dialogue, I want to now just end with a vote of thanks to all who have made this possible, really starting with the Electoral Commission, and we thank you, Chairman and Deputy Chairman, and all the other officials of the EC who have worked with us in making this day a success. The United Nations family, the development partners, Norway, Sweden,
Uganda to get into the 1 o'clock news, but do not worry, the online conversation continues. Let me also bring in Justice Simon Byabakama, yes sir, so that you can give us your parting shots.
Hello and good afternoon, you're welcome. This is NTV at 1. My name is Malcolm Sime. Let's have a quick look at what's making headlines at this moment.
Recruiters' woes. Troubled minister granted bail as NRM announces Rushen